Courage is stronger than fear, and real progress has never been stopped by intimidation or uncertainty. Fear is one of the oldest tools used to control people. It whispers that the risk is too great, that the price is too high, and that silence is safer than speaking out. Fear tells individuals to stay in their place, to accept injustice as normal, and to believe that change is impossible. But history proves again and again that fear only has power when people allow it to rule their hearts. Every major step forward in human progress was taken by people who were afraid but refused to be paralyzed by that fear. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means moving forward despite it. When someone chooses courage, they decide that truth matters more than comfort, that justice is worth the struggle, and that the future is more important than temporary safety. This choice is what turns ordinary people into agents of change. Intimidation is designed to make people feel small and powerless. It comes in many forms: threats, criticism, violence, and even social pressure. The goal is always the same: to stop movement, to freeze action, and to make people doubt their own worth. Yet intimidation fails when people stand together with conviction. When courage becomes collective, fear loses its strength. A united voice is far louder than any threat meant to silence it. Uncertainty is another force that feeds fear. People often hesitate because they cannot see the outcome of their actions. They ask themselves, what if this fails? Or what if things get worse? But progress has never come with guarantees. The path toward justice is rarely clear, and the destination is often invisible at the beginning. Those who wait for perfect certainty before acting end up waiting forever. Courage steps forward even when the road is unclear, trusting that movement itself creates clarity. Real progress demands discomfort. It challenges systems that benefit from inequality and exposes truths that some would rather ignore. That is why fear always appears at the moment when change is near. Fear is not a sign to stop. It is often a sign that something meaningful is happening. When fear rises, courage must rise higher. Courage also inspires others. One brave act has the power to awaken courage in countless hearts. When someone stands firm in the face of fear, it sends a message that resistance is possible and hope is real. This chain reaction is how movements grow and how societies transform. Fear isolates, but courage connects. It reminds people that they are not alone and that their struggle is shared. Progress is slow, uneven, and sometimes painful, but it is unstoppable when driven by courage. Oppression may delay change, but it cannot defeat a people who refuse to surrender their dignity. Fear can threaten bodies, reputations, and comfort, but it cannot destroy truth or erase the human desire for freedom. Courage keeps that desire alive. In the end, fear asks one question: what will it cost you? Courage answers with another: what will it cost if I do nothing? History remembers those who chose courage, not because they were fearless, but because they were faithful to what was right. And it is through that courage, quiet or loud, personal or collective, that real progress continues to move forward, no matter how strong fear may seem. True change is born from sacrifice, perseverance, and the willingness to stand for what is right, even when it is difficult. Every meaningful transformation in society has required people to give up something they valued: comfort, safety, approval, or certainty. Change does not come cheaply because injustice is deeply rooted and fiercely protected. Those who benefit from unfair systems rarely surrender their power willingly, which is why sacrifice becomes the first step toward progress. Sacrifice means choosing a higher purpose over personal ease. It is the decision to place values above convenience and conscience above comfort. Many people desire change, but fewer are willing to pay its price. They want justice without struggle and peace without effort. But lasting change demands more. It requires people who are prepared to endure hardship so that others may one day live with dignity and freedom. Sacrifice is not about suffering for its own sake. It is about investing in a future that is better than the present. Perseverance is what turns sacrifice into success. Standing for what is right is rarely a single act. It is a long journey filled with setbacks, delays, and disappointments. There are moments when progress seems invisible and efforts feel wasted. In those moments, perseverance becomes essential. It is the quiet strength that keeps people moving forward when results are slow and recognition is absent. Without perseverance, Even the strongest movements collapse under pressure. The road to justice is never smooth. There will be resistance from those who feel threatened by change. There will be criticism from those who misunderstand the struggle. There will be fatigued doubt and moments of deep frustration. Perseverance does not deny these challenges, it survives them. It teaches people to rise after every fall and to continue even when the end seems far away. Standing for what is right also requires moral courage. It means refusing to compromise values for popularity or approval. Often, doing the right thing places a person in the minority. It can lead to isolation, ridicule, or punishment. Yet history shows that moral truth is not measured by numbers. What is right remains right, even if few are willing to defend it. Change begins when someone decides that silence is no longer acceptable. Standing firm also sends a powerful message to others. When people witness unwavering commitment, they begin to question their own fears and doubts. One person's perseverance can awaken strength in many. This is how individual sacrifice turns into collective action. What begins as a lonely stand can grow into a movement that reshapes society. True change does not happen overnight. It unfolds slowly, shaped by countless sacrifices and sustained by relentless perseverance. Many who contribute to progress never see its final results. Their reward is not immediate victory, but the knowledge that they help move humanity forward. This understanding gives meaning to struggle and purpose to pain. In the end, standing for what is right is a choice made again and again. It is choosing integrity over ease, hope over despair, and perseverance over surrender. Through sacrifice and persistence, people carve paths where none existed before. And though the journey is long and demanding, it is through this very struggle that real lasting change is born. A future of justice, dignity, and freedom is possible, and it belongs to everyone who is willing to work for it. This vision is not a distant dream reserved for a select few. It is a shared destination meant for all humanity. Too often, people are taught to believe that fairness is limited, that freedom must be rationed, or that dignity is something only certain groups can claim. These beliefs are not truths. They are barriers created to maintain division and control. Justice is not a gift handed down by power. It is a right that must be claimed and protected. A just society is one where laws serve people rather than silence them, where opportunity is not determined by background, and where every life is valued equally. Such a future does not appear automatically. It is built intentionally, brick by people who refuse to accept inequality as normal. Justice grows when individuals demand fairness not only for themselves but for others as well. Dignity is the foundation of this future. To live with dignity means to be seen, heard, and respected as fully human. It means being able to walk through life without humiliation, fear, or forced silence. When dignity is denied to even one group, the humanity of all is weakened. A future rooted in dignity recognizes that no one must be pushed down for another to rise. True progress lifts people together rather than climbing over them. Freedom is the natural result of justice and dignity. It is more than the absence of chains. It is the presence of opportunity. Freedom means the ability to dream without restriction, to speak without terror, and to live without constant struggle for basic rights. This kind of freedom does not threaten society. It strengthens it. When people are free, creativity flourishes, communities grow stronger, and hope becomes a driving force instead of a fragile wish. This future belongs to everyone, but it demands participation. Hope alone is not enough. Belief must be followed by action. Each generation inherits both the progress and the unfinished work of those who came before. The responsibility of building a better tomorrow does not fall on leaders alone. It rests on ordinary people making extraordinary choices in their daily lives. Every stand against injustice, every act of compassion, and every effort toward equality moves the world closer to this shared vision. Working toward this future also requires unity. Division weakens progress while solidarity strengthens it. When people recognize that their struggles are connected, they begin to move together rather than apart. Unity does not erase differences. It honors them while focusing on common humanity. A just future is not about sameness. It is about fairness, where differences are respected rather than punished. There will be obstacles along the way. Change challenges comfort, and fairness disrupts systems built on imbalance. Those who work for justice may face resistance, misunderstanding, or exhaustion, but the possibility of a better future gives meaning to the struggle. Every step forward, no matter how small, proves that change is not only possible, it is already happening. In the end, a future of justice, dignity, and freedom is not something to wait for, it is something to create. It lives in choices made today and courage shown in the present moment. When people commit themselves to this vision, they become living proof that a better world is within reach, and though the journey may be long, the destination belongs to all who refuse to stop walking toward it. Every individual matters, and even the smallest actions have the power to shape history. Too often, people underestimate their own importance. They believe change is only made by famous leaders, powerful institutions, or massive movements. This belief quietly convinces ordinary people to step back, remain silent, and wait for someone else to act. But history tells a very different story. Real change has always been driven by individuals who chose to act when it would have been easier to do nothing. No voice is too small when it speaks the truth. Every movement that transformed society began with a single thought, a single step, or a single act of courage. One person refusing to accept injustice can ignite awareness in others. One honest conversation can challenge a lifetime of false beliefs. One brave decision can break a chain of silence that has lasted for generations. Small actions may seem insignificant in the moment, but their impact grows. They inspire others to act. The power of individual action lies in consistency. Change is not always loud or dramatic. Often, it is built quietly through repeated choices made day after day. Choosing fairness over bias, compassion over hatred, and truth over comfort may not attract attention, but it shapes character and culture. When these choices are repeated by many individuals, they become a force strong enough to reshape societies. History is not only written in grand speeches and public victories, it is also written in classrooms, workplaces, homes, and streets. It is written by teachers who encourage critical thinking, by workers who refuse corruption, by parents who raise their children with values of respect and equality. These everyday actions create the moral foundation upon which larger change stands. Without them, no movement can survive. Silence, on the other hand, allows injustice to grow. When people believe their voice does not matter, wrongdoing goes unchallenged. Injustice depends on this belief to survive. It thrives when good people doubt their influence. But the moment an individual speaks up, the balance begins to shift. Speaking out does not require perfection or complete knowledge. It only requires honesty and the willingness to care. Small actions also build courage. The first step is often the hardest. Fear tells people that standing up will bring consequences, rejection, or failure. But each small act of bravery strengthens confidence and weakens fear. Over time, what once felt impossible becomes natural. Courage grows through use, and individuals who once doubted themselves discover strength they never knew they had. Individual actions also create accountability. When one person takes a stand, it challenges others to examine their own choices. It reminds them that neutrality is a decision, and in moments of injustice, it often favors the wrong side. This quiet pressure encourages reflection and change. In this way, one person's integrity can influence many, even without words. It is important to remember that not every effort produces immediate results. Many actions seem unnoticed at first, but impact is not always visible right away. Seeds planted today may grow tomorrow, next year, or long after. The value of an action is not measured by instant success, but by its alignment with what is right. History honors those who acted with courage even when recognition never came. In the end, the belief that every individual matters is what keeps hope alive. It reminds people that they are not powerless, that their choices have meaning, and that their presence in the world has purpose. When individuals accept this truth, they stop waiting for change and start becoming part of it. And through countless small actions carried out by ordinary people, history quietly but powerfully moves forward. Resistance and hardship are not signs of failure. They are proof that the journey toward change is real and meaningful. Whenever progress challenges injustice, opposition naturally rises. Systems built on inequality do not collapse easily. And those who benefit from them often push back with force, criticism, or fear. Hardship then becomes an expected companion on the path toward justice, not a reason to turn away from it. Every struggle brings resistance. It may appear as open hostility, quiet sabotage, or emotional exhaustion. People working for change often face misunderstanding from those they are trying to help and hostility from those who feel threatened. This resistance can make the journey feel lonely and overwhelming, but hardship is not the end of hope. It is the testing ground where hope proves its strength. Hope is often misunderstood as passive optimism, a simple belief that things will somehow get better. In reality, hope is active and resilient. It is the decision to keep moving forward even when the road is rough. Hardship forces hope to grow stronger. When conditions are easy, hope is comfortable. When conditions are harsh, hope becomes courageous. It learns to stand firm instead of fading away. Moments of struggle reveal character. When everything is going well, commitment is easy. But when progress is slow and resistance is strong, true dedication is tested. Hardship asks difficult questions. How deeply do you believe in this cause? Are you willing to continue when there is no applause or visible success? Those who endure these moments develop inner strength that cannot be shaken by external pressure. Resistance also exposes the importance of the cause. Opposition often arises precisely because change threatens long-standing injustice. If the effort were meaningless, it would not be challenged so fiercely. In this way, resistance becomes evidence that the struggle matters. Every obstacle faced is a reminder that progress is pushing against something deeply rooted. And that is exactly why perseverance is necessary. Hardship teaches patience. Meaningful change rarely happens quickly. There are delays, setbacks, and moments when victories seem to slip away. Patience does not mean acceptance of injustice. It means trusting the process while continuing the work. Through hardship, people learn to measure success not only by outcomes, but by faithfulness to the mission. Hope also grows through shared struggle. When people face hardship together, bonds are formed that are stronger than comfort alone could ever create. Shared pain creates shared purpose. It reminds individuals that they are not alone and that their efforts are part of something larger than themselves. This sense of unity keeps hope alive even in the darkest moments. Darkness has a way of making light more visible. In times of hardship, even small victories shine brightly. A kind word, a moment of solidarity, or a small step forward can restore strength and renew determination. These moments remind people why they began the journey in the first place. In the end, resistance and hardship do not defeat hope, they refine it. They strip away weakness and leave behind a deeper, stronger belief in justice and change. Those who endure the struggle emerge with clarity, courage, and an unbreakable sense of purpose. And it is through this tested hope that progress continues, even when the path forward feels difficult and uncertain. Resistance and hardship are not signs of failure. They are proof that the journey toward change is real and meaningful. Whenever progress challenges injustice, opposition naturally rises. Systems built on inequality do not collapse easily, and those who benefit from them often push back with force, criticism, or fear. Hardship then becomes an expected companion on the path toward justice, not a reason to turn away from it. Every struggle brings resistance. It may appear as open hostility, quiet sabotage, or emotional exhaustion. People working for change often face misunderstanding from those they are trying to help and hostility from those who feel threatened. This resistance can make the journey feel lonely and overwhelming. But hardship is not the end of hope. It is the testing ground where hope proves its strength. Hope is often misunderstood as passive optimism, a simple belief that things will somehow get better. In reality, hope is active and resilient. It is the decision to keep moving forward even when the road is rough. Hardship forces hope to grow stronger. When conditions are easy, hope is comfortable. When conditions are harsh, hope becomes courageous. It learns to stand firm instead of fading away. Moments of struggle reveal character. When everything is going well, commitment is easy. But when progress is slow and resistance is strong, true dedication is tested. Hardship asks difficult questions. How deeply do you believe in this cause? Are you willing to continue when there is no applause or visible success? Those who endure these moments develop inner strength that cannot be shaken by external pressure. Resistance also exposes the importance of the cause. Opposition often arises precisely because change threatens long-standing injustice. If the effort were meaningless, it would not be challenged so fiercely. In this way, resistance becomes evidence that the struggle matters. Every obstacle faced is a reminder that progress is pushing against something deeply rooted. And that is exactly why perseverance is necessary. Hardship teaches patience. Meaningful change rarely happens quickly. There are delays, setbacks, and moments when victories seem to slip away. Patience does not mean acceptance of injustice. It means trusting the process while continuing the work. Through hardship, people learn to measure success not only by outcomes, but by faithfulness to the mission. Hope also grows through shared struggle. When people face hardship together, bonds are formed that are stronger than comfort alone could ever create. Shared pain creates shared purpose. It reminds individuals that they are not alone and that their efforts are part of something larger than themselves. This sense of unity keeps hope alive even in the darkest moments. Darkness has a way of making light more visible. In times of hardship, even small victories shine brightly. A kind word, a moment of solidarity, or a small step forward can restore strength and renew determination. These moments remind people why they began the journey in the first place. In the end, resistance and hardship do not defeat hope, they refine it. They strip away weakness and leave behind a deeper, stronger belief in justice and change. Those who endure the struggle emerge with clarity, courage, and an unbreakable sense of purpose. And it is through this tested hope that progress continues, even when the path forward feels difficult and uncertain. Even if we do not witness the final victory with our own eyes, our efforts are never wasted because they build the path for future generations. Much of meaningful work in life is unfinished work. People often desire quick results and visible success, but the most important changes unfold over long periods of time. Progress is a relay, not a single race, and each generation carries the responsibility of moving the mission forward before passing it on. History is filled with individuals who struggled, sacrificed, and persevered without ever seeing the full results of their labor. They planted seeds knowing they might never sit in the shade of the trees that would grow. This understanding requires humility and faith, humility to accept that one life is only part of a larger story, and faith to believe that every honest effort contributes to a better future. The idea of legacy gives meaning to struggle. When people understand that their actions will shape the world others inherit, their choices gain weight and purpose. Teaching values, standing for truth, and resisting injustice create foundations that future generations can build upon. Even small actions, spoken words, moral examples, quiet acts of courage can echo far beyond a single lifetime. Building a bridge for others to cross often requires sacrifice. Those laying the foundation may endure hardship while others benefit later. This can feel unfair, especially when progress is slow and opposition is strong. But real change has never been comfortable for those who begin it. The willingness to endure difficulty for the sake of others is one of the highest expressions of selflessness and courage. Future generations draw strength from the struggles of the past. When they face challenges of their own, they look back and find inspiration in those who refuse to give up. Stories of perseverance become sources of hope, reminding them that progress is possible even in the darkest times. In this way, today's sacrifices become tomorrow's encouragement. This long view of change also frees people from despair. When success is measured only by immediate outcomes, disappointment is inevitable. But when effort is measured by faithfulness to purpose, every step forward matters. Even failures can become lessons that guide those who come after.